Americans are arguing about deportation the way a family argues about money, fiercely. Constantly and with the uneasy knowledge that whatever they decide will show up in real life. Quickly, in the border towns, the argument looks like long lines under stadium lights and the insect buzz shimmer of heat at the Rio Grande. In New York, it looks like the marbled entrance of the Roosevelt Hotel, where suitcases and strollers share the curb with morning commuters. In both places, policy becomes scenery and people become the plot. Here's the sober baseline. Public opinion is a split screen, a majority of Americans now say. They favor substantially expanding the wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, a marked shift. Since 2019, that has surprised even some Democrats. At the same time, far fewer Americans than last year say immigration overall should be reduced, a swing back toward more pro-immigrant views. Those two facts, more control and less fear, sit uncomfortably beside each other, but together they capture the national mood. Tighten the front door but don't slam it. On the ground, enforcement has undeniably accelerated. ICE touted record breaking interior operations in the first 100 days of the new administration, with large-scale arrests highlighted as a return to muscular rule of law. At the same time, federal transparency has gotten murkier in places that matter for accountability. DHS's monthly enforcement tables, the bread and butter spreadsheets of modern governance, have been officially labeled delayed. While under review, you can feel the tug-of-war, louder announcements, quieter ledgers. And then there's the most eye-catching statistic of the year. After decades of growth, the foreign-born population actually fell during the first half of 2025 by roughly 1 to 1.5 million people, depending on how you read the survey-based estimates. That is a historic inflection point and likely reflects a mix of stepped up removals, tougher odds at the border, and self-deportation decisions by migrants weighing uncertain jobs against rising enforcement risk. It's also a reminder that immigration is not an abstraction. The numbers breathe, they move. But numbers alone don't explain the country to itself, people do. Consider Kilmar Abrigo Garcia, a Salvadoran construction worker who became a kind of Rorschach test for this moment. He was wrongly deported once despite court protection, flown back after judges intervened, then detained again this week. Baltimore, government lawyers floated deporting him not to his homeland but to a third country, Costa Rica if he took a plea, Uganda if he did not, sparking a court fight and a candlelight vigil. To some, the case shows resolve. The system won't be gamed. To others, it signals a system stretching the letter of the law to win at any cost. Either way, it puts a human face to what deportation means in practice: deadlines, leverage, and families counting sleeps. Walk a little farther down the policy road, and you meet the arithmetic of detention. On a recent August day, ICE held about 59,000 people, roughly 7 in 10 had no criminal convictions on record. That single ratio fuels two irreconcilable stories told in coffee shops and city councils, one about public safety and sovereign law, the other about overbreadth and wasted lives. Depending on your zip code and your media diet, both sound true, both can be true at once. Meanwhile, at the line itself, bursts of imagery keep searing into the nation's mind. Buses to Eagle Pass, lengths of concertina wire, drones filming crowds waiting to be processed, and the occasional month when CBP presents numbers that look dramatically lower than a year ago. Each new picture is drafted into the argument, proof for one side that toughness works, proof for the other that suffering has been made into a photo op. And away from the border, local governments are improvising. New York's Roosevelt Hotel, once a jazz age palace, lately an intake hub, has been a symbol of both hospitality and strain. Families sleeping outside on cardboard during surges, months later lines shrinking. As budgets tighten and the city retools its shelter strategy, you can report the chronology, but if you stood on the sidewalk you would remember something else: the mix of accents, the fatigue in a parent's shoulders, the handwritten numbers on a wristband. That too is America right now. What do I make of all this? I think the country is trying very clumsily to do two things at once: regain credible control and retain moral confidence. Credible control is turnstiles that click, rules that are knowable, timelines that exist in weeks, not years. Moral confidence is how we treat people while we do it, especially children, long-settled families with deep community ties, and those with plausible claims for protection. Most of our political theater swings wildly between these poles as if choosing one requires torching the other, but policy that lasts in a democracy is usually built where those instincts meet. In that space, some near-term predictions seem reasonable. First, interior enforcement will stay elevated, both because the White House owns the promise of it and because agencies have incentives to show measurable output. Expect continued arrests at check-ins and interviews, increased use of detention capacity, and headline surges when Congress is watching. Second, litigation will be a constant metronome. Any novel removal tactics, including third country placements, will get tested in federal court, and edge cases like Abrigos will shape the boundaries of what's allowed. Third, if labor markets tighten and prices bite, pressure will grow for more legal channels, seasonal visas, faster asylum triage, precisely to make illegal channels less attractive. A reminder that control and capacity are twins, not rivals. I also think transparency will decide legitimacy. If DHS continues to delay or thin out the monthly reporting that lets journalists and the public test official claims, skepticism will metastasize. If, on the other hand, the government publishes timely, comprehensible dashboards, encounters, detentions, removals, alternatives to detention, then even tough policy can earn grudging trust. Accountability is not an afterthought in immigration, it is the scaffolding that keeps a hard project upright. Finally, remember where voters' heads are. They are hawkish about control at the border, even as their broader fear of immigration has cooled. Any party that narrates only one of those instincts will keep losing the country in the middle. The only politics that might quiet the fever is one that looks the public in the eye and says without flinching, we will do both, stop chaos and honor dignity, and here is the scoreboard you can check each month to hold us to it. That's not a slogan, and it won't fit neatly in a chyron, but out where the desert light goes white at noon and the hotel awning traps the smell of coffee and winter coats, abstractions are luxuries. Deportation is no longer a debate topic. It is a bus schedule that leaves at 4 a.m., a knock at the door that rearranges a family, a court docket that stretches to 2030. If we mean to govern this human traffic with any wisdom at all, we will need less performance and more proof, less shouting and more daylight.